The idea behind this is how do we improve the way you're delivering SAP PI or CPI integration. We covered the CPI part Tuesday, and hope maybe you saw that, also the replay of it. And I expect that sometime next week I'll also send a replay from both these two events. And obviously there's a lot of the same thing because we want to simplify things. But the way you're delivering integration is obviously the same. So let's get started. So my name is Daniel Graversen. I've been working with SAP Integration for over 16 years. My big frustrations with PR is that if you want to do it right, there's a lot of things that you need to document correct, that show what you have been doing, who had made which changes to an object, and documentation in most cases were not really useful because you were just putting in the stuff and it wasn't actionable. So if someone wanted to figure out why something was created or changed, no one really knew or could figure it out. It would be a nightmare, and you would need to be, it needed to be something serious, otherwise nobody would ever look into it. So I started creating my first project of the documentation tool then. It didn't really work out that well, and since been creating a number of different tools, a PI message mapping tool, stuff like that. So that's what I've been doing along the way, trying to make it easier to develop SAP integration. And I guess this is almost 5 years ago, I got an idea about how to automate the testing of SAP PI, and that meant so the normal way you're testing would be to download a message from your productive system, trying to send it on the development system, and that's always going to give a lot of problems, and you want to set up some comparison of these messages, and that's really a manual process that you need to go through and figure out how do we deal with these things. I saw we needed to create something automated that could actually look at the ICOs, being able to build mocking services around it, and be able to actually run the same scenarios and see how they performed. And we created that, and along the way we also found some other ways to do things and improve it and stuff like that. So we make as few changes to the PI system as possible, but still make it possible to do changes. And along this way we also found out that if we needed to do this automated, we needed to figure out which object was changed on the PI system, and when we knew that, it was also possible to do a transport tool. So that's a little of our journey. It's been a while but I think we have managed some ideas. So some of the things we want to cover here is obviously what's process improvement, how can you deal with these things, how do you deliver SAP integrations. We will look at a demo, and then we'll show you how to get started with the tools. And if you have questions along the way, something I'm not covering enough, put them into the chat. I hopefully will be able to check that out from time to time and cover those things. Otherwise, there should also be some room at the end to answer your questions. So, two questions that I do, or two books I find interesting, and I think that the top one is the most interesting one, is the Phoenix Project. It's about how IT manager or whatever new IT manager figures out how to manage the IT processes, what they're all about, and how they can be improved as a part of the process. And one of the things he sees there is see the IT delivery process as what you'd see in a factory, where you got to some finished products output that you need to deliver to customers. And in the PI world or SAP integration world, it will be a new integration or changed integration that you need to deliver for them. And then in a factory, it's having some finished goods towards the end, and you need some different steps. You need someone to bend it, you need someone to paint it, screw things together. And that's the same when you're delivering integration. You want someone to develop it, someone to transport and governance, support it, and that's kind of the process thinking of it. And obviously it's also a lot into the DevOps, being able to test and deploy things a lot easier. And then the unicorn is more from a developer perspective, how you as a developer can make changes to the organization. But the cool thing about these is they're written as, how can I say, as like a fiction novel. So you don't get all the boring stuff, but it's more like, okay, this is what you would experience in these things. So recommendable reading over Christmas. And obviously a little about how I see it. So when we're talking about delivery processes, there's a lot of things that you can consider in this process. Does it add value? Can it be removed? Can we simplify it? And can we automate it? And I think you need some of all of these to be able to deliver integration easier. And if we just look at your delivery process, how you are delivering SAP integrations. So when I've been at different clients, there's been different ways that they have been handling the processes, been asking other people on how to deliver the integration, how to deal with these things. And then you do your development, and then you need to ask someone to do something, like approve something, and then you need to interrupt their flow from doing the work they're doing to be able to actually deliver these or help you with your delivery process. And every time you're interrupted, it takes some time before you get back into a good thought, or being able to be productive again. And that's so if you have some steps, they need to make sense and add value to the process. An example, this is a PI example where you need to develop some changes. You want to test them yourself, you want to document them, or need to document them in some format that the user can be able to use, put them into Excel document, create some kind of import guide. When we import this to production, what are the steps that developers need to see? Then you need to ask approval from someone else. You need to get a transport from transport management. You need to place the objects into it, update all the documentations with the transport number, ask an architect again to approval, import it to QA, ask someone to approve it there. And this is every time that you have these kind of handovers, it takes a lot of time. And if they're not really adding any value, that these guys does not really understand what you are doing, it just adds a lot of complexity, latency, frustration. I guess you probably have tried this thing and trying to bang these guys up and say, okay, I'm doing this, I just need to change it. And so sometimes this would take days, and I would forget what I was up to and how I would deal with things. Obviously, it's the right process, but it could be done a little more flexible. And then this week, I had to do a change on an XSLT for a client. We did the change. It took maybe 15 minutes to change it, 10 minutes, to find the right place, update that, test it myself, move it to production. There was no gates, no thing, and then we could see if it works as expected in production. Not really the way I loved to do, but I guess that was kind of the standard approach for it. at the specific client, and we didn't have any documentation on it. And if someone asked why this was transported in Monday, I would not be able to give you any documentations on it. I don't know how many steps are in your transport process from you get the response. And in this example, I have not used the ticket tool and how that would all be affected. But I think there's normally a lot of these steps that is good practice, but where do they add the value? And then if you look at how many systems is involved in these, where do developers need access? And I think that this is also part of the onboarding process. How many systems do I actually need as a developer? I need access to ServiceNow or whatever ticketing system, transport system, Git repository. You probably will be using some Word or Excel templates that you put in this content in, or you can probably put it into some ServiceNow or Confluence pages, whatever. Then you need access to development. You need access to QA and production. And I think most developers should not really have access to QA production, because you just end up doing a little bit of mess in there. Then we have backends. You probably need access, hopefully the FIGAF tool, and PAT or some other testing tool. And all of these just adds a lot of complexity, and you need unified access to all of it. And as you probably know, I'm not advocating that you need to remove the governance, because I think it adds a lot of value. You know which system has been impacted. You make sure that developers are not moving things into production that they should not do, like updating the bank transfer file to put in your account number into it, or whatever it could be that could be harmful to the business. And then and then you need to ensure coordinate with the other parts of the business. And the other thing is, if something fails, it's easier to go in to see, okay, so what was changed the last 2 hours or 10 days? And then you can actually get a list and see, okay, it's these things, so probably it may have something to do with those areas. And maybe in the PI perspective, we may be a little spoiled, because we can actually see it's the specific interface that's changed or that's failing, and then it's a good assumption that there must be something wrong with some of those components. So as you saw before, there's a lot of these tools that makes it difficult for you to manage the process and figure out how to do it. And let me show you how you can actually simplify this process.
De kan stadig have dig.
Okay, så Maggie, de kan have mig. Jeg skal lægge ud med. Good. So the way we will be dealing with this is that we got a CTS transport, and we have done a change because the business wanted it. So we have created here a CTS transport. We know it's an export. This is all done from our repository and directory. It contains both things. What we'll do is we will add it to a ticket. You will obviously add some relevant information to it. Sorry. Normally when doing demos, it's a good thing to put something useful into it. So we have a mapping change. We know the landscape here is, this is our CTS landscape. It's a geo number. Or we could add whatever extra information into it. We can also add the link to the geo if you wanted to. Then what we can do is we can see here, we have now So here we can see we have this CTS transport, and we then have the option here to add all dependent objects. And then we can see from this CTS transport, we do have a mapping change. And yeah, so just have a mapping change in this. Yes, let's skip that. What we can then do is we can go in here, we can look up what kind of test cases do we have for this, and then I, as a developer, can just select one of these. Obviously, I should select all of them because we want only to have valid test cases in the system. And then from this, we can simply just select them all. We can then run them on a given system. And then this will take all of these messages that we have for the specific incident, start sending them through the system. And what we can then look at is we can look at the output here. We can view the result. Oh no, we got a lot of errors. Let's see what they are. And we can take a look at the diff. So this is something about the diff that are different, that should have been done a little differently. We can also see there's something up here that should be ignored. And to ignore something, we can just add like this. So I obviously need to show you why. Why this is behaving. So I can actually go back to our ticket here. We can actually see, so what were we actually changing in this message mapping, and we have this functionality for all objects. So we can look here at the different versions. So we can just check here what were changed as a part of this. Up here we have this internal payload that looking at the mapping file, and we can see here that there was a divide parameter that were changed to 1.5. From 1.5 to 1.3, that means it's expected that there's some differences in these values. Not the best example of a good change, but means that we can actually see what was going on, and then we can take these test cases and say, okay, now we know this is true. This is the result we want as a part of this. So next time we run it, this is the output that we are getting for this test case here. So now we can start our transport, and obviously our transport consists of two things. It consists both of a CTS transport. Let me just see here if it works. Can log in correctly. And it seems like my system is a little slow at the moment. Okay, so let's just see Daniel's. So Daniel has a transport here. We can see what are the objects as a part of this. We just have one object, and I think something that has changed with some of the later releases is you can actually see which object is a part of the CTS transport. For earlier version of PI, it's not really possible, and it will just show you have this transport, and then you need to go into the system to change it. And then let's just release it. We can then go into our import overview. So we can go into our 7.5 system. Here we can see we got transport here that was M or N, and if we import this, guess I should not use the web UI import request. It's not that good. I guess maybe you need to be a little more aware of it. Then the idea is that you would import this, use CTS as you normally would in the transport system. And what we can then do is we can go to our production test system in this case, and then we can do a synchronization on it. And then it will figure out what are all the objects that is changed as a part of this. And with that, we can actually pretty quickly see what was changed. And we can see it is pretty fast to synchronize. So we can see this was imported. We can see it was actually added to a ticket. And that means it has actually figured out what change was a part of this ticket. And then we got all the documentation about when we have imported this, what object was a part of it. And that means if you're going into this PI system at a later point, you can see that this was imported because of this change. And then you can find the JIRA number for this. So that's all good. Any questions along the way? Just put them into the chat. The other thing is, for instance, if you have a small change. So I've also made a change. So we have two ways of transporting, both if you're using CTS and if you're not using CTS Plus. So we have these two communication channels. We will assign a ticket to it, just in the same way. Right. And we can select which landscapes to use. We will just be using our PI system test. So now we need to configure some communication channels, and obviously this can be done with both kind of transports. If you have, for instance, CTS Plus transport and you need to import it, the things that irritate people most is that you need to go into the system and apply the configurations to it. And the way we try to get around this to simplify the process as much as possible is that you have a repository where it can see what are the communication channels and how are these communication channels delivered or configured in the full landscape. So it becomes a lot easier for you as a developer to see what these values are and how they're supposed to be working and stuff like that. Yeah, this takes a little longer than I normally see. But the idea is here that you get one screen where you can configure the communication channel with all the relevant information that it needs. So here we can see the values. Oh, yeah, not really optimal. Transport path that's selected here. And if it was a CTS transport we were importing with this, we would also be able to see the relevant values there. Any questions along the way? Just put them into the chat. So let me just go back to the transport. So here we can still see our ticket. We can see it's in transport, and we can then go into our transport. We can check if it's valid, if there's anything that are missing. We can send it to approval. We have a lot of different steps to send to specific user. They can do approval of it. And once I'm also approver, which is probably not something I should be on the same system, so I should not be able to approve my own transport. We can put in some text about this, and we can then import it here. Let's see if this one is done. No. So those were the demos. So let me just show you these two scenarios that we have here. So you would normally create your transport in Solution Manager. As a developer, you would then put in all the objects into this transport. You will, add the objects to it. You will perform the user tests. You'll release the transport, and then you will start the transport and configure communication channels. So if that screen were done, you could then see for this communication channel what were the settings that we needed to deal with, and then you will simply just press synchronize, or you set it to be automatically synchronized every half an hour whenever you're doing your imports, and then it will apply the configuration channels, and then actually all is done for applying the configurations. Then you will go into the production system and do the same thing. Just select import or import the CTS transport, and then everything is fine and configured without user interaction. And that means whatever external system you're using, the transport process becomes a lot faster. If you do not use CTS Plus, which I think simplifies the life a little, because then you have one less system to do. You can see in this log what are the different objects that have changed. You can then create a transport of these things. So you simply just select all the objects that's part of a change. You test the change. We saw it could just look up all the different test cases that were part of the change. You could then the system will create a normal file export. You can then configure the communication channel, import it to QA, or select that you want to import it. The system will then activate the import, configure the communication channels, and then you're doing the same thing for production. And then once it's done, you will create the documentation, and then you can take this documentation and put it into Solution Manager or Jira, whatever you have these things. And obviously the import processes can also be performed via web APIs or REST APIs though, so you can actually connect it to Jira and say, okay, once we select import, perform the import directly. So as you saw here, we did the change, we added the changes to the ticket, both the CTS transport. We performed regression testing. We applied all configuration in the landscape. And then the only thing you need to do is you send this to the architect and say, hey, approve this. And then defining, depending on what kind of rules you have, you can import it to QA yourself as the business to approve and test it. Import it to production yourself, or do it from the API via your ticket. And then you can use the FIGAF tool to create the documentation for this change.
Taler du med mikrofonen?
Det gør jeg nemlig. Nej, ikke.
Jeg taler i mikrofonen.
Nej, det skal du ikke. Ikke lige nu her. Det må du gå bagefter. And obviously you probably already have questions. Put them into the chat or ask to unmute yourself. Then we can do that. As you saw, there's probably a lot of systems in place that you anyway need to consider on how they can be simplified your processes regarding this. And we have the CTS Plus option, but in general, I think it's you get a better way of doing it without the CTS transport. But I guess that depends on the company policies. So some of the challenge I normally see with CTS Plus is, and especially if you have older PI releases, it's difficult to see what objects is import or in a transport. I think it's only, I don't know, the last couple of releases they have added that functionality, so you can see all objects. Otherwise, it's just we have objects that this type, and then there's a lot of different functionality to perform all the tests, which makes it a lot easier to deliver SAP integration because it's this one. So obviously trying to create the same webinar for both things. CTS Plus, a lot of test cases, and if you just want to test it manually, it's okay, but sometimes you will get into challenges that there's too many things going on. Training is difficult, but I think also that whatever processes you have also takes quite a long time for you to implement for the organization to actually be able to leverage your current processes and be able to deliver consistent integration experiences. I have seen a lot of people building their own tools, and I do love building tools that can automate some of these things. But on the other hand, it's probably some of these things that is probably not your core competencies, and there's a lot of things that you need to support also in the future for the next developers that comes onto the project. Business case for this kind of automation, obviously it depends on how complex or rigid your processes are, and how they should be, how rigid this should be, or what should be documented. If you have SOX compliance, if you have GDPR, if you have some of these other things that's important, it adds the complexity, and then you end up spending a lot of time on the development process. And then if you just have a few changes a month on new development, it's a simple way to get the system paid off. We also have a lot of test automation with.
Jeg skal tisse og pølse.
Okay. Yes, so a lot of test automation. So as you saw, it was pretty simple to execute these test cases. Creating them is also really simple. It compares a lot of different formats. We have this kind of masking of data. So if you're looking at data structures, you can see that there's a change on the HR interface on the employee name that was capitals were changed or something like that. Then you can actually see that it's only those changes. You cannot see what the names of these employees or anything like that does, as a way to protect the data. And then it also supports PI to CPI migration testing. There's also a test support automation tool that allows you to fetch data, set up automatic alerts, so you can actually process them a little simpler. There's free trials of the tool. Just go to figaf.com/DevOps. Then you can sign up, try it, set it up. It is really simple.